So I was able to beat New Game Plus 7 on all 3 Paladin subclasses recently, and I just wanted to make a quick video to showcase the builds I used, while also going over what I found to work best on Paladin in general. To start off with, between these 3 subclasses, I think when trying to beat the game for the first time, or for lower New Game Plus levels, I believe Divine or Radiance are the way to go. With Divine, it has high survivability with Divine Protection, as well as Divine Pillars doing huge amounts of damage with a huge range to clear large amounts of enemies at once. Radiance puts out large amounts of damage with Immolation once charged, as well as a decent amount of passive damage through its Fire Aura. Justice, while still being decent for early New Game Plus, is a bit awkward to play as the hammers don't really have a good range, forcing you to stay close to enemies the entire time, which makes the later floors pretty dangerous, and are also pretty slow, so enemies can easily move out of it if trying to kite them. Once trying to push past New Game Plus 4 or 5, I think Divine ends up emerging as the winner due to Divine Pillars having a huge range, so you can easily and safely pull large amounts of enemies and drop pillars, deleting a majority of them with huge damage instantly. On top of that, if you have the upgrades to it, have additional explosions that go off and tend to clean up whatever was missed by the initial explosions. Survivability wise, while not to be entirely relied on, as it will only ever have a 20% chance whenever Divine Protection does go off, it adds a lot of breathing room with its invulnerability buff. Radiance is still pretty great to push with, as its damage output is quite high and scales quite well with levels and better gear. Divine is just safer, as Immolation requires you to remain quite close to enemies before going off, putting it in a lot of danger, and it also doesn't have the safety of Divine Protection that Divine has. Justice's issues remain the same, where it is pretty awkward to play, and requires you to remain even closer to enemies than Radiance for the hammers to go off. You can get around it by playing around corners a lot, as the enemies will get bundled around the entrance, allowing hammers to hit them all at once, but it's definitely a lot slower than both Divine and Radiance, especially since the hammer's tick rate is always 1 second between hammers and cannot be reduced. So starting off with the actual builds, we have Radiance Paladin. For its skill point priority, I recommend initially leaving Blessed Strike, Armor Knight, and Inner Flames at one point. I would immediately max out Immolation as it's the main damage, followed by Conviction for mana, and Lay on Hands for more healing. After those 3 are maxed, I would up Armor Knight and Blessed Strike. I'd move on to attuning Trinkets before upgrading Inner Flames, as all it does is increase how long one stack lasts when upgraded. For these skill upgrades, I start with Purging Flames from Magic Shop, as Radiance is already based around fire damage, and the fire pulls do decent damage to help clean up whatever didn't die from Immolation. Beyond that, I would prioritize Cleansing Touch, Shield of Faith, Resolve, and Glancing Blows. In the latest patch, they fixed a bug with Shield of Faith where the bonuses were reversed, so now you should level it up fully rather than just leave it at level 1 like before. Grabbing Zeal, Blazing Lance, and Bringer of Flames are also nice pickups as well to increase damage. Bringer of Flames is actually really good the lower the New Game Plus level is, due to how enemy armor scaling works, but it doesn't scale as well as enemy armor increases, due to it remaining a flat value, but it will still remain a decent pickup. Gear-wise, since Blessed Strike, Immolation, Zeal, and Inner Flame Aura all scale with spell power, you'll want to start out with putting enough points into Strength to wear Strength gear around your level, with Keen and Spell Power enchants, and maybe a few Stout enchants for more HP, and then putting some remaining points into Focus. This should work well for actually quite a few New Game Plus levels, due to how tanky Paladin is with Lay on Hands, and with the defensive skill or upgrades I stated earlier. Just note that the damage will eventually fall off hard, to where the enemies might not be able to kill you, but you will also take forever to kill them, drastically increasing your run times. Once you are able to get around 300 to 400 spell power from gear, usually from weapon, offhand, and cape, wizard title also helps. I recommend switching over to intelligence gear due to it providing a lot more spell crit rate and spell crit damage for the spells to scale off of. Your damage will increase substantially, while its survivability will remain decent as well, due to Paladin's great defensive kit of Shield of Faith, Glancing Blows, and Lay on Hands. Once you do have the intelligence gear, I recommend Powerful Dirk with Vulnerability, and then a Tome and Offhand with Destruction. For prefixes, I recommend Fire Damage %, Intelligence, Spell Power, and then Vitality. I prioritize Fire Damage % because everything except Blessed Strike's initial damage and Zeal's damage are buffed with fire. For suffixes, Cast Speed, Cooldown Reduction, Crit Rate, Spell Damage, Damage Reduction, and then Mana Cost. Since Immolation is a charge skill, Cast Speed is a must in order to get the full damage out quicker. I currently use 2 pieces with Vitality for HP plus Regen, as well as 1 enchant for Focus. I then put 40 more points into Focus for more max mana, for Shield of Faith, Zeal, and to meet the Focus requirement for Cape. The remaining points all go into Intelligence. For food, I default to the Undead Damage Bread for drinks. I recommend Spell Crit Rate, Spell Cast Speed and Cooldown, and 50% Spell Damage Drink. In terms of playstyle during the run, I run into a group of enemies and press Immolation. The damage is insane, but the range is a bit small, so I'll usually have to either Bless Strike to finish it off, or back off for safety before going back in for another Immolation. For bosses, I charge Immolation, then use Blessed Strike while it's on cooldown. If your mana starts getting low, meleeing should proc Conviction to regain the mana, and the damage loss won't be that bad if you were lucky enough to get all upgrades for Zeal, plus the passive damage procs from Flame Aura. Now onto Divine Paladin. For skill point priority, I recommend initially leaving Blessed Strike, Armor Knight, and Divine Protection at 1 point. I would immediately max out Divine Pillars, followed by Conviction and Lay on Hands. After those 3 are maxed, I would up Armor Knight and Blessed Strike. I would move on to Attuning Trinkets before upgrading Divine Protection, as all upgrading increases the invulnerability duration and reduces the cooldown, which is nice. I'd rather double triggering up bonuses as the chance will always be 25% anyways, so it's not entirely reliable in the first place. For these skill upgrades, I like starting with Divine Pattern from Magic Shop, just because I enjoy pulling everything in the forest levels, and the second explosion will clean up whatever the first one misses. The other option from Magic Shop that I would consider would be Purging Flames, if you wanted to remove Wrathful Strike from the Orb pool immediately, as they are mutually exclusive. In the run, I prioritize Pillars of Wrath, Divine Pattern, Cleansing Touch, Resolve, Shield of Faith, and Glancing Blows. Zeal is a nice damage bonus, but requires 3 orbs to really do damage with it, so I don't prioritize it that high. Gear-wise, since Divine Pillar scales with spell power, you'll want to start out with putting enough points into Strength to wear Strength gear around your level, with Keen and spell power enchants, and maybe a few Stout enchants for more HP, and then putting remaining points into Focus. This should work for quite a few New Game Plus levels, though bosses will take quite a while to beat in this setup, but again, you won't really be in any danger of dying. Once you're able to get around 300 to 400 spell power from gear, usually from Weapon, Offhand, and Cape, with Wizard title helping, I recommend switching over to Intelligence gear, due to it providing a lot more spell crit rate and spell crit damage for the spells to scale off of. Once you do have the Intelligence gear, I recommend Powerful Dirk with Vulnerability, and then Atome and Offhand with Destruction. For prefixes, I recommend Physical Damage %, Intelligence, Spell Power, and then Vitality. I prioritize Physical Damage % because Blessed Strike, Divine Pillars, and Zeal all have the physical tag, so it would increase the damage for all of them. Pillars of Wrath or upgrade does add additional lightning damage, but it only goes up to 50%, which is why I prioritize physical damage, although I could be wrong on this. For suffixes, cooldown reduction, followed by cast speed, then crit rate, then spell damage, and then damage reduction. I currently use 2 pieces with Vitality for HP plus Regen, as well as 1 enchant for Focus. I then put 40 more points into Focus for more max mana for Shield of Faith, Zeal, and to meet the Focus requirement for Cape. The remaining points all go into Intelligence. For food, I default to Undead Damage Bread. For drinks, I recommend cooldown reduction, spell crit rate, and 50% spell damage. In terms of playstyle during the run, I just pull large amounts of enemies, then draw Pillars and run away. Pillars has a delay before going off, giving time for the enemies to walk into it while chasing you, and end up getting deleted by either its initial explosive or the subsequent ones. For bosses, I press Pillar and Blessed Strike in between, and melee for Zeal and Conviction procs once my mana gets low. Finally, we have Justice Paladin. For skill point priority, I recommend initially leaving Blessed Strike, Armor Knight, and Divine Protection at 1 point. I would immediately max out Judgment, followed by Conviction and Lay on Hands. After those 3 are maxed, I would up Armor Knight and Blessed Strike. I would move on to Attuning Trinkets before upgrading Lawbringer, as well upgrading helps a bit, especially with a chance at silencing and disarming ranged attackers. Since I mainly play around corners, it doesn't apply much anyways, and it doesn't apply to bosses at all. For these skill upgrades, always start the run with Purging Flames to help with mob clearing, as Judgment is very inconsistent in clearing in open maps. It is hard to bunch the enemies together to clear them all at once without taking large amounts of damage. In the run, I prioritize Cleansing Touch, Resolve, Shield of Faith, Glancing Blows. Zeal and Hammer Wrath are decent for damage, but both require 3 orbs each in order to deal decent damage. Now gear-wise, similar to Divine and Radiance, Since Judgment and Blessed Strike scales with spell power, you'll want to start out with putting enough points into Strength to wear Strength gear around your level, with Keen and spell power enchants, and maybe a few stout enchants from your HP, and then putting remaining points into Focus. Once you're able to get around 300 to 400 spell power from gear, usually from weapon, offhand, and cape, with Wizard title helping, I recommend switching over to Intelligence gear due to providing a lot more spell crit rate and spell crit damage for the spells to scale off of. Once you do have the Intelligence gear, I recommend Battle for Dirk with Vulnerability, and then a Toman offhand with Destruction. For prefixes, I recommend Physical Damage %, Intelligence, Spell Power, and then Vitality. I prioritize Physical Damage % because Blessed Strike, Judgment, and Zeal all have the physical tag, so it would increase the damage for all of them. For suffixes, crit rate followed by spell damage, then cast speed, then cooldown reduction, then damage reduction. Unfortunately, since Judgment is capped at a 1 second tick rate and lasts for 7 seconds with a 15-second cooldown, once you gain 100% cooldown reduction, any beyond will not do anything, which is quite easy to reach with trinkets and the cooldown drink and maybe 1 or 2 enchants on gear, so it's not a priority. I currently use 2 pieces with Vitality for HP plus regen, as well as 1 enchant for Focus. I then put 40 more points into Focus for more max mana for Shield of Faith, Seal, and to meet the Focus requirement for Cape. The remaining points all go into Intelligence. For food, I default to the Unto Damage Bread. For drinks, I recommend a cooldown drink, spell crit rate drink, and sudden death. In terms of playstyle during the run, I aggro enemies and then play as best as I can in around corners in order to not get pelted by projectiles, and also to bunch enemies together so that Judgment will hit all of them at once. Blessed Strike can also hit enemies through walls, which helps with clearing enemies. For bosses, you press Judgment and Blessed Strike, and then you apply Judgment once the hammers stop falling. There's also a small glowing aura around you, but it's pretty hard to see during boss fights. If mana becomes low, I use my weapon for Conviction procs to regain mana, while also giving some damage with Seal procs. That's all I have for today's video, but I did want to highlight that in the most recent patch notes, for the 7th patch, the devs stated that they are working on balance changes, including scaling, especially for weapon and strength builds, and will be the main focus of the next patch. I am definitely excited for this, as of right now intelligence builds are supreme, which means that the majority of classes are built the exact same way, so I'm glad that they are addressing it so soon. My next video will be on Sorcerer followed by Warrior, and then Ranger will be last. Hopefully the patch will be out by the time I get to Warrior and Ranger, so that I will be able to play around with more weapon builds. Anyways, thank you all for watching. I truly appreciate all the support you guys have been leaving in the comments, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.